She paid for a stranger's Uber with the little money she had. What this unknown man, secretly a CEO, did next shocked everyone around her. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. It all began on a rainy afternoon, when Aurora stood under the flickering street lamp at the edge of Rosewood Avenue, trying to hail a ride before nightfall. The cold drizzle soaked through her thin second-hand jacket, and in her purse she had just enough money for the cheapest ride home, one she urgently needed to catch before she missed her evening shift at the local diner. Despite her own worries, Aurora couldn't ignore the figure slouched against the nearby bench, a tall man in a slightly wrinkled business suit, seemingly lost and shivering as the rain drenched him. She hesitated. In her world, every cent counted. Being a single mother, juggling rent and groceries and saving for her daughter Mia's next school expense had trained her to watch every bill carefully. Yet something about this man's quiet desperation pulled at her heart. He looked exhausted, pale under the street lamp's glow, his shirt collar undone as if he had sprinted several blocks under the downpour. Aurora approached timidly, asking if he needed help. The man, who introduced himself simply as David, let out a grateful sigh. He explained that his wallet had been misplaced earlier in the evening and his phone battery was dead. With no way to pay for a ride or call a friend, he felt stranded in the rain. His voice carried a note of embarrassment, as if unaccustomed to depending on anyone. Despite her financial worries, Aurora remembered the words her mother used to say, "Kindness is free, and it can change somebody's fate." She hailed a nearby Uber, then, without fanfare, paid for David's fare with the last bit of money she had set aside for her own ride. The cost was more than she could truly spare, yet she couldn't turn her back on him. She pressed the damp bills into the driver's hand. "Thank you," David said quietly, stepping into the car. "But please, give me your address. I promise to repay you." She shook her head, offering him a small, apologetic smile. "Don't worry, just pay it forward someday if you can." In that moment, she had no idea who this stranger really was. She believed him to be another unlucky soul caught in the city's unrelenting downpour. Little did she know David was not merely a random passerby. He was, in fact, the CEO of one of the city's most influential companies. Still shaken by a personal crisis, he had dashed out of a business gala without his coat, phone charger, or wallet, needing fresh air to think. His uncharacteristic vulnerability led him to the same corner where Aurora stood. And now, watching her fade into the rain-soaked distance, David felt something stir in his chest. A mixture of gratitude and a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. The next day, Aurora woke up to the dim light that seeped through the curtains of her modest apartment. Mia, her 6-year-old daughter, was already stirring. Aurora managed a tired smile, though she dreaded the new day's challenges. She'd arrived home late on foot, drenched to the bone, after having given her last cash to the stranger. She considered skipping breakfast so Mia could eat fully, but a gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her neighbor, Ms. Delgado, clutching a basket of fresh fruit. "I found these at a discount stall this morning," Ms. Delgado said softly. "I thought you two might like some." Aurora's chest tightened with gratitude. Their neighborhood, though humble, was full of good people who supported each other in small ways. She thanked Ms. Delgado, shut the door, and let out a quiet sigh. Money was tighter now than ever. She had used her emergency stash for that Uber and was now left wondering how she would pay next month's electric bill. A fleeting moment of regret passed through her mind. Should she have parted with her last spare cash for a stranger she might never see again? But Mia's laughter from the bedroom reminded her that she wanted to teach her daughter kindness and compassion. Resolved, she packed Mia's school bag with the fruit Ms. Delgado had given them and walked her daughter to the bus stop. Later that afternoon, Aurora rushed from her day job assisting at a tiny local design studio to her evening waitress shift at the diner. Her worn sneakers splashed through puddles on the pavement. But she didn't slow down. At the diner, the manager was particularly gruff about tardiness, an attitude that often put Aurora's nerves on edge. Tonight, though, something was off from the moment she walked in. Instead of barking at her about being on time, he gave her a stiff nod and handed her an apron in silence. Inside the diner, Aurora's friend Carla was already filling coffee cups and taking orders. "You're never going to believe this," Carla whispered excitedly when Aurora tied on her apron. "The new corporate executives in town have sent someone here to scout for a future catering partnership. We've never had fancy business folks walk in during the late shift." Aurora, too preoccupied to absorb Carla's excitement, simply nodded. She breezed from table to table, scribbling down orders and topping off cups with tired efficiency. As the hours went by, she slipped into her usual haze of physical exhaustion, half listening to the clink of cups and murmured conversations. She didn't notice the tall figure at table 9, a table Carla had taken earlier. At the end of the night, the guests at table 9 had left. Only then did Aurora see an elegant business card left behind on the check tray. It read, "David McAllister, CEO of Redwood Innovations." Her hand froze, heart pounding. Redwood Innovations was a powerhouse in the city, known for developing everything from top-tier software to philanthropic initiatives. She had heard about them on the local news, dreaming of a day she could find a better-paying position in a stable company. But it was always a far-off fantasy. Why would David McAllister leave his card? And how had she not noticed him? Slowly, Aurora recalled the man in the suit from the rainy night, the shape of his jaw, the calm cadence of his voice. Could it be the same David? But that David had worn a disheveled suit, not the crisp, polished attire Redwood's CEO was famed for. Besides, no one in such a position would go wandering around in the rain like that, right? Carla approached from behind, noticing Aurora's puzzled expression. "Hey, what's up with that card? Did they leave a tip?" Aurora shook her head. There was no tip, only the card with that powerful name. She tucked it into her apron, deciding she would figure this out after her shift. Perhaps it was a fluke. Maybe Redwood executives left their CEO's card everywhere they went, or maybe David himself had dropped it accidentally. In any case, Aurora wanted to remain cautious. Reality had taught her that big names rarely spelled good fortune for someone like her. At midnight, the diner's neon sign blinked off. Aurora changed back into her worn jacket, then stepped into the chilled air for the walk home. Her tip money was meager tonight, barely enough for groceries. Another wave of regret threatened to wash over her when she remembered the last of her emergency cash spent on that stranger's Uber. Yet she couldn't ignore the small spark of hope that flared in her mind. If the stranger was indeed David McAllister, maybe her act of kindness had started something she could hardly imagine. Rain began to fall again, gentle this time as though the sky itself had softened. Aurora passed shuttered shops and dim streetlights, heading toward her modest apartment. She kept replaying the moment she'd met the soaked man in her mind, the gratitude in his eyes, the genuine surprise that anyone would part with their money for him. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but a sense of possibility hung in the air, as if any day now her phone might ring with unexpected news. Finally, she reached her building. Before climbing the stairs, she paused, looking down at David McAllister's business card. Her reflection in the building's glass door looked both exhausted and curious. Without fully understanding why, she slipped the card into the pocket of her uniform pants, close to her heart. Somewhere across the city, in a high-rise office, David scrolled through the employee logs Redwood Innovations had gathered in hush-hush daily operations. Hours earlier, he had recognized Aurora's face at that diner table, though she hadn't realized he was watching her from across the room. He left his card as a direct invitation, a quiet signal that he wasn't about to let their strange, rainy night encounter end there. What he planned to do next was more than a simple repayment. He intended to change Aurora's life. The next morning, sunlight slipped through Aurora's thin curtains far earlier than she would have liked. Mia's soft singing drifted from the adjoining room, brightening the otherwise cramped apartment. Aurora rolled out of bed, massaging her neck, which was sore from the long shifts at the diner. Today was her only day off from both jobs, an opportunity to rest and get a few errands done. But resting felt like a luxury. How could she relax with the electric bill looming and a near-empty refrigerator? She made a quick breakfast of scrambled eggs using the last 2 eggs in the carton. Mia popped into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, hair a bit tangled. Despite their situation, the little girl was all smiles. "Mommy, can we go to the park later?" she asked. "I want to feed the ducks." Aurora smoothed Mia's hair gently and nodded. Even if they couldn't afford many outings, the park was free. It might do them both some good to breathe fresh air, especially after the stress of the previous days. When the phone rang, Aurora almost didn't answer. Telemarketers often called at odd hours, hawking extended warranties or credit card offers. But she noticed the unfamiliar number, felt a tiny jolt in her stomach and picked it up. "Hello?" she said hesitantly. A woman's measured, polite voice answered. "Is this Aurora Evans? I'm calling on behalf of Redwood Innovations to confirm a meeting with Mr. McAllister. He was hoping to schedule a short discussion if you're available this afternoon." Aurora's mouth went dry. Redwood Innovations again. "Wait, sorry, who did you say you are?" The woman repeated her introduction. Aurora glanced over at Mia, who was busy brushing her doll's hair at the small kitchen table. I'm not sure. A meeting about what?" Aurora asked. "I'm simply relaying the request, ma'am. Mr. McAllister said you two had crossed paths, and that you would understand." Aurora's heart thudded. So the man at the diner, the one she'd encountered in the rain, truly was David McAllister, and he apparently wanted to see her now. "Yes, of course," she blurted, flustered. "When and where?" "He'll be at the Redwood Innovations headquarters around 1 o'clock. The address and details have been sent to your phone. Please bring any identification you might need to sign in." Before Aurora could ask another question, the line disconnected with a polite goodbye. She set the phone down, feeling oddly weightless and unsteady at the same time. Redwood's offices were in the most upscale part of downtown, a place filled with skyscrapers and sleek cars. She'd never had reason to set foot there before. Her reflection in the dark screen of the phone showed confusion and a spark of hope. Why would the CEO of Redwood want to see her? "Mommy, can we still go to the park?" Mia's voice interrupted. Aurora nodded, a bit distracted. "Yes, sweet girl. Let's feed the ducks this morning, and then I'll have to go to a meeting," she said. Mia accepted this easily, excited to spend a few hours outdoors before Aurora had to handle whatever was waiting for her. Later, the crisp morning air greeted them as they walked toward the park. Mia held a small bag of breadcrumbs for the ducks, skipping every few steps. Aurora tried to keep her nerves from showing, but the idea of visiting Redwood Innovations in just a few hours was daunting. She pushed away the swirling questions in her mind to focus on Mia. The child's giggles, the rustle of leaves, and the sight of the ducks waddling around the pond momentarily soothed Aurora's anxieties. For a half hour or so, they settled on a bench near the water. Mia tossed crumbs, squealing every time a duck waddled closer. But Aurora's thoughts eventually drifted back to Redwood. She couldn't forget how the manager at her design studio job had once spoken in hushed awe about Redwood Innovations, how it offered top salaries and how employees boasted about benefits that covered everything from family insurance to childcare. She dreamed about working there, but it was the kind of place that seldom hired people from Aurora's side of town without a college degree or big connections. The memory of that rainy night flickered again. She had given David her last cash, never suspecting who he was or that she'd see him again. "What if I made a fool of myself somehow?" she whispered, mostly to herself. Mia looked up curiously, but Aurora quickly changed the subject, urging her to keep playing. By midday, Aurora was back at the apartment, rummaging for something suitable to wear. Most of her clothes were simple outfits fit for diner shifts or casual chores, no business suits or professional attire. Eventually, she chose the neatest blouse and a pair of plain black pants, hoping the overall look was presentable. She pulled her hair into a low ponytail and dabbed on the slightest bit of makeup. Her reflection in the mirror looked anxious but determined. She arranged for Ms. Delgado to watch Mia for a few hours. "Go," Ms. Delgado insisted kindly. "I'll take her for ice cream if she behaves. You focus on whatever you have to do, dear." Aurora thanked her and, with a pang of nerves in her chest, set out for Redwood Innovations. She had to take 2 buses, weaving through midday traffic until the gleaming skyline came into view. The Redwood building itself soared above the street, glass panels reflecting the sun, a manicured courtyard at the entrance. Security guards in crisp uniforms stood by the sliding doors, greeting arrivals with polite nods. Feeling out of place, Aurora approached the reception desk in the lavish lobby. The floors were polished marble, and overhead lights cast a gentle glow that made everything look expensive. She told the receptionist she was there to see Mr. McAllister. The receptionist, polite but reserved, asked for her name, then checked a digital list, eventually handing Aurora a visitor's badge. "You'll need to head to the 22nd floor," she said, gesturing toward a set of elevators. "Mr. McAllister's assistant will meet you by the elevator bank." Aurora nodded shakily, following the directions. Riding the elevator, she felt her stomach twist with each floor that lit up. 22nd. She forced herself to breathe slowly. After all, she wasn't sure why she was even here. Maybe he just wanted to thank her or repay the cost of the Uber. She exited on the 22nd floor, only to be greeted by a panoramic view of the city through massive windows. The atmosphere was hushed, with the occasional ring of a phone or clack of a keyboard. A woman stepped forward from behind a sleek white desk. Her voice was the same measured tone Aurora remembered from the phone call. "Ms. Evans, right this way." Aurora followed her past glass-walled conference rooms and modern art displays. It felt surreal walking among professionals in tailored suits who seemed so at ease in such grandeur. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. The assistant gave a discreet knock, then pushed one door open. Inside was a spacious corner office. Tall windows allowed the midday sun to flood the room. Light glinted off minimalist furniture and a single potted plant that sat near a small sofa. And there, behind a polished desk, stood David McAllister. Gone was the disheveled man from that rainy evening. Now he wore a crisp, tailored suit and carried the poised demeanor of someone used to commanding a room. A faint smile curved on David's lips as Aurora entered. "Thank you, Adrian," he said to his assistant. "Please close the door." The assistant nodded, leaving Aurora alone with the CEO. Her heart hammered in her chest. She shifted awkwardly, unsure of how to greet him. "Mr. McAllister," she said quietly. He walked around his desk, extending his hand. "David," he corrected gently. "We can drop the formalities. We've already met in unusual circumstances." Aurora managed a tentative smile, shaking his hand. "Yes, in the rain," she replied. I'm glad you're all right, but I'm not quite sure why I'm here." He gestured toward the small sofa. "Please have a seat," he said. Aurora settled on the edge, her posture stiff as he joined her. A short silence stretched between them, not exactly uncomfortable but charged with anticipation. "I owe you an apology," David began. "That night I was caught off guard and, well, you basically saved me from being stranded. I promised to repay you, but then realized that simply returning your money would be trivial compared to the kindness you showed me." He paused, leaning forward. "So I started looking into ways Redwood could help someone like you, someone who clearly works hard and deserves more than she's been given." Aurora's breath caught. The sincerity in David's eyes clashed with the initial intimidation she'd felt. She swallowed, wondering if she should speak. Instead, David continued, voice low, yet warm. "I looked into your background, only the basics," he added quickly, sensing her alarm. just enough to know you juggle multiple jobs, that you have a young daughter. And it struck me, Redwood has programs for single parents, educational grants, job training, but we rarely see applicants from your neighborhood. I want to change that. I want to give you an opportunity." "An opportunity?" Aurora echoed softly. Could this really be happening? He reached behind him, picking up a slim folder from the coffee table. "It's all in here. Redwood's apprenticeship program, the flexible schedule, the compensation. It's a path to eventually joining our design or administrative teams if you'd like. It's not charity, Aurora. It's a real position. You'd train, develop new skills, and get paid better than what you earn at your current jobs." Her mind whirled. An offer from Redwood? From the CEO himself? It felt as though her life had just pivoted onto a completely different course, one she'd never dared imagine. Struggling to keep her composure, she stared down at her hands. Could it be so simple? Accepting a job from a man she hardly knew, yet who had the power to change everything? She thought of Mia's face, her endless optimism. She remembered those nights balancing her checkbook with tears in her eyes, praying for a miracle. And now, in this polished office, with the city skyline gleaming behind him, David McAllister was offering her that miracle. "Why?" she breathed, her voice wavering. "You don't even know me." He looked at her gently. "I know enough. And sometimes," he added, "helping one person is the start of something bigger. You gave me the last of your money on a night I was a complete stranger. Let me return that kindness on a scale that can truly lift you up." Aurora's chest filled with a surge of emotion, gratitude, disbelief, excitement, and fear. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but only one came out. "What do I do next?" David's smile brightened. "We can finalize details today if you want. It'll involve a background check, basic paperwork, some orientation, and if any part of it makes you uncomfortable, you can walk away any time. No strings attached." She tried to blink back tears, thinking of how drastically this could improve Mia's life. Better hours, a stable salary, maybe even a chance for her daughter to see her more often. Her thoughts spun like a whirlwind. "Thank you," she whispered finally, voice thick with emotion. I want to try." David nodded, relief visible in his eyes. "Then let's do it." He stood, extending his hand to Aurora again, this time as if sealing a partnership. And in that quiet gesture, she saw the promise of a future she had only dreamed about, all sparked by one act of selfless compassion in the pouring rain. Aurora walked out of David McAllister's corner office with her heart pounding so loudly that it practically echoed in the hushed corridor. The folder he'd given her felt heavier than its slim pages suggested. Inside it lay a new reality, one that could change her family's life for good. She walked past Redwood Innovations employees who seemed engrossed in their own work, phones pressed to their ears or eyes fixed on spreadsheets. None of them paid much attention to her, yet she couldn't help but feel their confidence in the air. She wondered if she might soon share in that poise and sense of purpose. Her mind swam with 100 questions. She was supposed to show up the next day for an orientation meeting, sign some official forms, and complete a background check. Then she'd begin Redwood's apprenticeship program. Although David had been clear that this was a legitimate opportunity, a real job, not a charitable handout, Aurora still grappled with a sense of disbelief. What had she done to deserve this stroke of fortune? David's assistant, Adrian, was waiting near the elevator with a courteous smile. "All set?" she asked, her polished manner far friendlier than Aurora had first assumed. She handed Aurora a small visitor's packet. Inside were instructions for filing initial paperwork online, plus details about Redwood's employee benefits, things like health coverage, flexible scheduling, and even child support services for single parents. Aurora felt dizzy just scanning the headings. "Yes, thank you," Aurora managed to say. She pressed the elevator button and Adrian turned to walk away, but hesitated for a moment. "By the way," Adrian said quietly, "Mr. McAllister doesn't do things like this often. Or at all, really. You must have left quite an impression." Her tone was warm, lacking the cynicism Aurora might have expected. Aurora simply nodded, unsure how to respond. The doors slid open, and she entered the elevator, descending with a swirl of emotions. Out on the street, the reality of her circumstances hit her again. She still had to figure out how to juggle her diner shifts and the design studio job until Redwood's position became stable. Could she truly afford to drop both jobs at once? Redwood's apprenticeship paid better than either job individually, but it was still an unknown. She worried about Mia, about bills, about stepping into a world so far beyond her comfort zone. Yet, for the first time in ages, Aurora felt genuine optimism overshadow her fear. If David was serious about Redwood's commitments, she could potentially give Mia the kind of stability she'd always wanted. She made it home by early evening, her mind abuzz. Ms. Delgado greeted her at the apartment door, Mia clutching the older woman's hand and bouncing with excitement. "Mommy, guess what? Ms. Delgado took me for ice cream. I got chocolate with sprinkles." Aurora smiled, putting down her folder to scoop Mia into a hug. "That sounds amazing, sweet girl. Did you say thank you?" Mia nodded vigorously. Once Ms. Delgado headed back to her own unit, Aurora served a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce from a nearly empty jar, and listened to Mia recount her day. It felt surreal to do something as ordinary as cooking dinner after the extraordinary afternoon she'd had. At the table, Mia chattered about the ducks at the park, about her favorite cartoon, and about a drawing project at school. Aurora felt an undercurrent of pride as she watched her daughter's face glow with curiosity and life. She decided she wouldn't tell Mia about the Redwood offer just yet, not until she signed the paperwork. After dinner, Aurora flipped through the folder's contents again, double-checking the orientation schedule and recommended dress code. Redwood's offices required smart casual, though new apprentices sometimes dressed more businesslike until they learned the norms. She felt a pang of worry, remembering her limited wardrobe. After cleaning up, she sat down with her laptop, an older model that often froze, and tried to fill out as much of the required digital paperwork as she could. The background check form asked for addresses from the past 10 years. She grimaced. She'd moved 3 times, once after losing her old place. Then came a request for references. She wasn't quite sure who to list besides Ms. Delgado and perhaps Carla from the diner. For professional references, maybe the manager at the small design studio? But that manager tended to look down on her. Still, Aurora typed in the details, forging onward. An hour later, she closed the laptop with a sigh, her eyes sore. Mia had fallen asleep on the couch, a marker still clutched in her little hand. Gently, Aurora carried her to bed. Standing by the window afterward, she gazed out at the streetlights reflecting off damp pavement, thinking about how everything had started with one small act of kindness. Morning arrived faster than she expected. She gave Mia a kiss on the forehead before dropping her off at school. The bus squeaked away from the curb, and Aurora quickly caught another bus headed downtown for Redwood's orientation. Nervous energy churned in her stomach as she disembarked near the towering building. Inside, the same receptionist from yesterday greeted her with a friendly smile, handing her a new visitor's badge. "You'll be meeting with HR today," she explained. Within minutes, Aurora found herself in a modern conference room with half a dozen others, each looking as anxious as she felt. A tall man in a Redwood-branded polo shirt introduced himself as Darren from the Human Resources Department. He welcomed the group and launched into an overview of Redwood's mission statement, highlighting the company's dedication to innovation, community outreach, and employee growth. Aurora felt both inspired and intimidated. She was used to workplaces where employees were barely acknowledged beyond the tasks they had to do. Here, Darren spoke about Redwood's culture of mentorship, the potential for upward mobility, and the emphasis on continuous learning. He explained that they'd each be assigned mentors within the department that best matched their skills or interests. Then, after a set period of apprenticeship, Redwood would decide on permanent placement. 2 hours passed in a blur of presentations, policy discussions, and motivational videos showcasing Redwood's achievements. Aurora found herself next to a soft-spoken woman named Belinda, who was also joining the apprenticeship program. In a whispered exchange, Belinda admitted she'd come from a struggling background too, and Redwood offered a second chance at a stable life. Aurora felt a sense of kinship. Maybe she wasn't as alone here as she feared. By mid-morning, the group split up for brief one-on-one interviews with HR reps. Aurora was directed to a smaller office where Darren sat across from her at a tidy desk. He started with typical questions: her work history, her ability to balance the apprenticeship schedule, her familiarity with basic office tasks. Aurora did her best to explain her background without sounding self-pitying. She mentioned the diner, the design studio, and her willingness to learn new skills. Darren nodded thoughtfully, making notes. "Here at Redwood, we evaluate more than just academic qualifications," he said kindly. "We look for resilience, adaptability, a willingness to grow. Mr. McAllister mentioned you showed remarkable compassion and resourcefulness in, well, a unique situation. That says a lot about your character." Aurora's cheeks warmed. She realized David must have told Darren something about the rainy night encounter, though she couldn't guess how much detail. They moved on to discussing Redwood's schedule. Darren explained the apprenticeship would start with 3 full days a week in Redwood's training center, plus 1 day of practical shadowing in various departments. Pay would be enough to cover basic living expenses, plus some benefits. Aurora's heart soared at the mention of health coverage. She'd never had real coverage for herself or Mia. Once the interview concluded, Darren directed Aurora down the hall for a quick ID photo. She tried to smooth her hair and straighten her blouse, managing a small, nervous smile for the camera. In minutes, she had a temporary employee badge printed with her name. Holding it in her hands, she felt a wave of pride. This was real. Walking out of the building later, Aurora held a stack of documents, plus a schedule indicating when her apprenticeship officially began. She blinked in the sunlight, almost disoriented by the magnitude of changes unfolding so quickly. She wanted to call someone, Carla maybe. She'd definitely have to call the diner soon to give notice, or at least reduce her hours drastically. The same went for the design studio. A swirl of relief and regret mingled in her thoughts. Both jobs had been lifelines at one point, yet they barely supported her and Mia. This Redwood door opening was an exit from a cycle she never thought she'd escape. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was Ms. Delgado checking in to see if Aurora could pick up Mia from school or if she needed help. Aurora glanced at the time and realized she had enough hours left in the day to take a second bus ride to the school. "Yes, Ms. Delgado," Aurora answered, still breathless with excitement. "I can handle it. Thank you so much for offering, but I want to tell Mia the news myself." Ms. Delgado agreed, voice warm and maternal as always. Aurora headed to the nearest bus stop, clutching her Redwood folder like a treasure. She stared at the newly printed ID badge, letting the reality sink in. She was on the path to working at Redwood Innovations. At Mia's school, parents waited in little clusters outside the chain-link fence. Children darted past, releasing the day's pent-up energy. Mia came bursting out of the doors, flinging her arms around Aurora. "Mommy, you came!" Aurora spun her daughter around, letting out a joyful laugh. "Yes, baby girl, I did, and I have something special to tell you." Hand in hand, they began the walk home. On the way, Aurora explained that she might have a new job, a better job, one that would let her be around more while also taking care of their needs. Mia didn't entirely grasp the seriousness, but she clapped her hands, excited by any news that made her mother smile. "I want you to draw me a picture of your dream house, Mia," Aurora said with sudden inspiration. One day maybe we can have a bigger place with your own room and a yard where you can play." The little girl's eyes went wide, mind already brimming with ideas. As they approached their apartment complex, Aurora caught sight of Ms. Delgado on her balcony. Aurora waved enthusiastically, her grin telling the older woman that the day had gone better than she could have hoped. Ms. Delgado returned the wave, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Aurora had a lot to figure out: finances, child-care arrangements, letting go of her old jobs gracefully. But in her heart, she felt a steadfast optimism. After so many years of scraping by and ignoring her own hopes, it felt like the future had cracked open, unveiling possibilities she never dared to envision. She remembered David's face as he handed her that folder, his quiet determination to help. A warm gratitude spread through her. It was more than an employment offer. It was a renewed sense that life could change with a single benevolent gesture, like that night in the rain when she had risked her last few dollars to help a stranger who turned out to be exactly the miracle she needed. The first thing Aurora did the next morning was head to the tiny design studio where she'd been helping out part-time. She wanted to give her notice in person. It was a cramped space above a dry cleaning shop with a single flickering fluorescent bulb in the hallway. As she climbed the stairs, her heart pounded. Not from fear this time, but from the rush of moving forward. Inside, the studio owner, Simone, was hunched over a drafting table, poring over blueprints for a local restaurant's new signage. Simone was known for her sharp tongue and even sharper eye for detail, traits that sometimes made Aurora's job nerve-wracking. Aurora had always been grateful that Simone gave her a shot as an assistant, but the pay was paltry and the hours unpredictable. Aurora cleared her throat softly. "Morning, Simone," she said, gently tapping the doorframe. Simone looked up from her drawings. "Aurora, we're behind on the Henderson mock-ups," she said, wasting no time. "I need you to prep the stencils and recheck color palettes." Aurora forced a careful smile, stepping fully into the room. "Actually, I need to talk to you about something." Simone's pencil stilled. She let out a faint sigh as though anticipating trouble. "Yes?" Aurora explained as succinctly as she could. She had been offered a new opportunity, an apprenticeship at Redwood Innovations. She tried to keep her tone professional, expressing gratitude for the experience she'd gained at the studio. She offered to stay on for a brief period if Simone needed the help. Simone's expression shifted from surprise to a kind of tight-lipped resignation. "Redwood? That's quite the leap," she said at last, setting her pencil aside. "Good for you." Aurora detected no malice in her voice, only a distant sense of disbelief. "I appreciate everything," Aurora continued, feeling a pang of guilt. "I learned so much here, and I—" Simone waved a hand, dismissing any further explanations. "I understand. Everyone's got to move on eventually. I can't blame you. Redwood, that's a real career path. More than what I can offer you." Aurora nodded, touched by the unexpected sincerity in Simone's voice. She'd expected the woman to be cold or dismissive, but Simone actually rose from the drafting table, walked over, and extended her hand. "Thank you for your help," Simone said, a bit stiffly but genuine. "If Redwood's giving you a shot, take it and run. Just promise me one thing. Keep growing your talent. You've got potential. Don't let it wither." Aurora's eyes stung with grateful tears as she shook Simone's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise I won't." They arranged for Aurora to finish out the week, just tying up loose ends on the Henderson account. Aurora assured Simone she would do her best to leave everything in order, though the Redwood apprenticeship started soon. Simone nodded understandingly, then turned back to her drafting table with an air of finality. Leaving the studio, Aurora felt a curious mix of relief and sadness. This place, humble as it was, had given her a small foothold outside of waitressing. Now she was moving on to something far bigger. Next stop was the diner, Aurora's second job, the one that had kept food on the table most steadily. It was nearing lunchtime when she slipped inside. The comforting smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee enveloped her. She found Carla balancing 3 plates on one arm, weaving past tables full of hungry customers. Carla's face lit up when she saw Aurora. "Hey, stranger, didn't expect you here today. Everything okay?" Aurora smiled, stepping aside to avoid a busboy rushing by. "I'm fine. Busy morning, but can we talk in the back for a minute?" Carla deposited the plates at a nearby booth, then led Aurora into the cramped kitchen area. Pots clanged on the stoves, and a dishwasher whooshed in the background. The moment they had a sliver of privacy near the storage shelves, Aurora pulled Carla aside. "I got an apprenticeship at Redwood Innovations," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "I'll be starting soon. I have to leave the diner." Carla's mouth fell open, her eyes shining. "Redwood? As in that huge company downtown?" Aurora nodded, unable to keep the grin off her face. "They're paying me for training, giving me a better schedule, benefits for Mia. I still can't believe it." Carla flung her arms around Aurora in a tight hug, nearly knocking over a stack of paper cups. "That's amazing!" She pulled back, tears visible in her eyes. "You deserve this, girl. You've been working yourself to the bone. Redwood's no joke." Aurora's heart warmed at Carla's genuine support. "I know, it still feels unreal, but I'll have to give notice, immediately. Is the manager around?" Carla jerked her head toward the front. "He's at the counter, barking about the lunch rush. Let's go." They navigated back to the main dining area, which was filled with clattering silverware and lively chatter. The manager, a stocky man named Ron, stood behind the register, counting receipts with a perpetually furrowed brow. Aurora approached him carefully. Ron barely glanced up. "You're not on shift, Evans. Something you need?" Aurora braced herself. She explained the Redwood opportunity just as she had for Simone. Only this time she didn't expect much warmth. Ron had a tendency to snap about anything that disrupted his diner's routine. Sure enough, he frowned at her. "You're leaving? We're swamped half the time and you want out now?" He exhaled sharply. "Kid, you do what you gotta do. But if you leave this week, I can't guarantee you any reference if they call here." Aurora swallowed, expecting this attitude. Ron wasn't exactly known for his generosity. "I understand," she said. "I'll work my remaining scheduled shifts, but I have to start the apprenticeship soon. I can't pass it up." Ron rolled his eyes, then turned away to answer a call in the office. The dismissal was clear, but Carla gave Aurora another hug, promising to keep in touch. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "You have bigger, better things ahead." Despite the sour note with Ron, Aurora felt freed as she left the diner. There was no turning back. All those nights of cleaning counters after closing time, all those double shifts that left her exhausted, they were becoming part of her past. Redwood was her future. Over the next few days, Aurora juggled finishing up at the design studio, pulling her last diner shifts, and preparing Mia for the changes to come. She stayed up late reading through Redwood's apprenticeship guidelines, trying to absorb everything she could about the company. Charts, financial statements, design trends. It was all new territory for her. Every so often she'd feel a flutter of panic. Could she really handle this? Redwood was renowned for setting high standards. She had no formal college degree, no advanced training. But she couldn't forget Darren's words about resilience and the chance to grow, and David's quiet confidence in her, though they'd barely spoken since that first offer, resonated whenever she felt doubt creeping in. In quieter moments, Aurora allowed herself to dream a little. She pictured an apartment where Mia had a real bedroom, maybe even her own desk to do art projects, a small patch of grass for the child to run around on, weekends free enough for mother-daughter outings that didn't revolve around Aurora's frantic work schedule. She envisioned a life where she could afford groceries without counting every coin, and where she might be able to put a little aside for Mia's future education. For the first time in years, those dreams felt almost within reach. She taped her temporary Redwood ID badge to her bedroom mirror as a motivator, a tangible reminder that something extraordinary was happening. Soon enough, the final shift at the diner ended with a bittersweet wave from Carla. The last day at Simone's studio concluded with a handshake and an unexpected gift, a small hardcover sketchbook and a note that read, "Keep creating." Aurora blinked back tears, promising herself she would. The night before her official start day at Redwood's apprenticeship program, Aurora tucked Mia into bed, telling her a bedtime story they both knew by heart. But as Mia's eyelids drooped, Aurora improvised a new ending, one where the heroine found a magical door leading to a brighter realm, thanks to a simple act of kindness. Mia smiled drowsily, drifting into dreams. Once the apartment was quiet, Aurora stood by the window, cradling a mug of tea. The city lights glittered, a backdrop to her thoughts. She recalled the night she had met David, the pouring rain, the desperation in his eyes. So many times she'd questioned whether giving him her last cash was foolish or naive. But in the end, that selfless decision led to a door she never knew existed, a door that now stood wide open, inviting her to walk through. Tomorrow, she would step fully into this new world at Redwood Innovations, hoping to prove she belonged there. And beyond every moment of uncertainty, she felt a potent mix of gratitude and optimism. A single act of kindness had flipped her life's trajectory, and as she watched the rain-slicked streets below, Aurora could almost sense that the best chapters of her story were just beginning. Aurora woke before the alarm, nerves already sparking through her body. Today was the official start of her Redwood Innovations apprenticeship, a day she had both anticipated and dreaded. She slipped out of bed, careful not to rouse Mia, and tiptoed into the kitchen. Outside, morning light was just beginning to color the sky, a sign that she was up far earlier than her usual routine. Her coffee maker sputtered to life, filling the tiny space with the aroma of fresh brew. Aurora sipped from her mug, eyes scanning the notes she'd scribbled down after reading Redwood's orientation materials. Key company values: integrity, community, innovation. Core habits for new apprentices: punctuality, curiosity, collaboration. The words felt significant, but also abstract. She reminded herself, Redwood believed in her. Darren from HR had said so, David McAllister had shown it through his actions, and she refused to let them down. By the time Mia stirred, Aurora had managed to quell some of her jitters. She prepared breakfast, a bowl of cereal and a piece of toast for Mia, then helped her daughter get dressed. After a flurry of motherly tasks, Aurora handed Mia off to the neighbor, Ms. Delgado, who would escort Mia to school. Aurora had worried about the changes to their usual schedule, but Ms. Delgado insisted she was happy to help, her warm smile a steady reassurance. "You're doing the right thing, dear," Ms. Delgado said, patting Aurora's arm. "Keep at it and remember, you're not alone." Aurora felt a surge of gratitude. After a quick hug with Mia, she hurried out to catch the bus, Redwood folder tucked under her arm. The bus ride felt surreal. Instead of wearing her diner uniform or toting design studio samples, she was dressed in her best pair of slacks, a simple blouse, and a blazer she'd found at a thrift shop. She checked her reflection in the window, trying to convince herself she looked professional enough. At Redwood's lobby, the usual bustle of employees hurried past. Aurora flashed her new ID badge, and the security guard waved her through with a friendly nod. She recalled that on orientation day, a small group of apprentices had been introduced to Redwood's campus-style offices, the training areas, and the lounge spaces. But today felt different. Today she wasn't just touring. She was stepping into her new role, ready to learn and to prove herself. She followed signage toward the training center located on the 10th floor. The elevator doors opened onto a brightly lit space, walls lined with motivational graphics and Redwood's guiding principles. At a large reception desk, a cheerful woman in Redwood attire greeted Aurora by name. "Welcome back. You'll be in classroom 2 for your initial workshop. Let me show you." Moments later, Aurora found herself in a sleek training room furnished with modern chairs and large interactive screens on the walls. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. About a dozen other apprentices were already there, some chatting, others quietly checking phones or flipping through reference materials. Aurora recognized a few from the previous orientation day, including Belinda, who waved her over. "Glad to see you," Belinda said, sliding a spare chair closer so Aurora could sit. "I was worried I'd be the only nervous wreck in the room, but it looks like we're all in the same boat." Aurora exhaled a laugh. Yes, definitely not alone. They commiserated about leaving their old jobs, about the intimidating prestige of Redwood, and about how extraordinary it felt to be given such an opportunity. Soon, a pair of Redwood trainers arrived, a man named Leo and a woman named Grace, both exuding an approachable yet confident energy. Leo explained that during this first phase of apprenticeship, they would split the group into smaller teams to learn the basics of Redwood's workflow: project management software, internal communication tools, brand guidelines, and more. Grace passed out digital tablets, each labeled with a name tag. Aurora clutched hers, heart hammering. She'd never used a tablet so extensively before. "Don't worry if you're new to this technology," Grace said, seeming to read Aurora's thoughts. "That's the point of apprenticeship, to learn. We'll guide you step by step." Aurora breathed easier. The next hour was spent setting up Redwood email accounts, exploring the company's internal portal, and even practicing simple tasks like scheduling a mock meeting. Aurora's learning curve felt steep. She stumbled a bit navigating the portal, worried that her inexperience would stand out. But each time she faltered, a trainer or a fellow apprentice stepped in to assist. She returned the help wherever she could, listening carefully, re-explaining steps to anyone who needed it. That sense of mutual support brought some relief. Belinda nudged Aurora with an elbow once. "You're a natural teacher," she teased. "Look at you, guiding half the class." Aurora blushed. "I guess, after having to figure out everything the hard way for so long, I'm used to learning step by step." Eventually, Leo introduced a small group activity. They were handed a fictional Redwood project scenario, a new marketing campaign that had gone awry. Their task: propose a corrective plan using Redwood's collaboration tools and brand style. The group had to produce a short presentation by the day's end. Aurora joined 4 other apprentices in a circle, scanning the scenario. It felt like playing make-believe manager, but the stakes were meant to mimic real Redwood challenges. They brainstormed ideas, typed up notes, and split tasks for their presentation. Aurora volunteered to handle the design aspect, mocking up how the revised branding might look. She used a free design tool on her assigned tablet, carefully aligning text and color palettes she remembered from Redwood's guidelines. The others handled budget outlines, scheduling, and internal communications. Working together, Aurora felt a sense of camaraderie she'd seldom experienced in her previous jobs. Despite being total beginners, they collaborated earnestly, each bringing their own perspective. At midday, they had a short break, so the group headed to Redwood's cafeteria, a surprisingly welcoming space with bright lighting and plenty of healthy food options. Aurora gazed at the variety: salads, soups, sandwiches, realizing Redwood subsidized employee meals, making them more affordable than any typical downtown cafe. She grabbed a bowl of tomato soup and a small sandwich, feeling grateful she could eat a decent lunch without stressing about cost. Belinda joined her at a table, and soon others from their apprenticeship group filtered over. One of them, a tall guy named Marcus, admitted he'd spent 6 months unemployed before Redwood accepted him into the program. Another, Giovanna, used to work in retail and was desperate for a stable job that offered some future prospects. Their stories resonated with Aurora. Everyone had a reason for being here, a second chance at building a better life. "Have you met David McAllister yet?" Giovanna asked casually. I heard he sometimes drops in on training sessions." Aurora nearly choked on her soup. She swallowed carefully before responding, yes, kind of." She didn't elaborate. She could see in their eyes that David McAllister was a legend at Redwood, someone revered for his business acumen and philanthropic leanings. Aurora realized that telling them how she'd met him, on a rainy street, spending her last money to get him an Uber, might sound outlandish. She simply offered a neutral smile. "He seems nice." Belinda raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing Aurora was holding back, but said nothing. They finished lunch and headed back to the training room, eager to polish their group project. That afternoon, as they assembled their final presentation slides, Aurora found herself taking the informal role of design lead, tweaking color contrast and font sizing with a confidence that surprised her. She'd gleaned these skills from her time with Simone's studio and had never imagined they'd be relevant in a corporate environment. The entire apprenticeship group reconvened to present their solutions, each team hooking their tablet up to a large screen. Some ideas were clumsy or incomplete, understandably so, given how new everything was. But the trainers praised them for creativity and asked insightful questions. When Aurora's team presented, her design mock-ups projected across the screen. Her group members explained how Redwood's brand style would be upheld while rectifying the marketing mishap. Grace nodded, impressed by the clarity and color coordination. Leo commended their synergy. "It's clear some of you have an eye for design and others for scheduling, but you worked together seamlessly." Aurora's cheeks warmed. She hadn't felt this proud in a long time. The trainers wrapped up the session, reminding everyone that tomorrow they'd rotate to a new set of skills: customer relations, scheduling software, and Redwood's approach to problem solving. Aurora left the 10th floor with her mind spinning, but in the best possible way. She was learning fast, and better yet, she felt like she belonged. At the ground floor lobby, she paused near the large Redwood emblem mounted on the wall. The hustle of employees crossing back and forth wove around her. She remembered the days she'd arrived to pick up menial design tasks or endure long diner shifts, feeling her life was stuck in an endless loop of survival. Now, with Redwood's ID badge clipped to her lapel, she was part of something dynamic and forward-facing. Even so, her mind fluttered back to David, the man who had catalyzed this entire transformation. She'd only seen him that once at his office after the rainy night incident. Surely Redwood's CEO was too busy to check on a single apprentice, but a small part of her wished she could thank him again. She wanted him to see that his faith in her was already bearing fruit. She was applying herself diligently, building a future for Mia. On the bus ride home, Aurora found herself smiling at the reflection in the window. She'd grown used to leaving her jobs mentally drained and emotionally spent. Today she was exhausted, but in a brighter way, like a runner who's finished the first lap of a race, exhilarated by the momentum. She clutched her Redwood folder against her chest, letting the city's late afternoon sun wash over her. Yes, she still had worries. Balancing Mia's school pickups, mastering Redwood's software, and proving she could handle challenges beyond her comfort zone. But for once, her worries felt like stepping stones rather than walls. A single act of kindness had flipped her life's narrative, and now she was determined to show the world, and herself, that she could rise to the occasion. 2 weeks into her apprenticeship, Aurora could hardly believe how quickly life had changed. Mornings began with an eager energy instead of dread. Each day at Redwood was packed with training sessions, practical exercises, and short stints shadowing established employees. Though her body was tired from the learning curve, she felt invigorated. This was the kind of exhaustion that made her proud rather than weighed down. She settled into a daily rhythm. Ms. Delgado would walk Mia to school, and Aurora would catch the early bus downtown. Sometimes, if she timed it right, she'd snag a seat next to Belinda, who lived in a nearby neighborhood. They'd exchange updates on their assignment progress or share tidbits about Redwood's vast internal culture, everything from hearing about David McAllister's philanthropic projects to rumors about Redwood's next big software launch. They bonded over the newness of it all. Belinda was also a single mother, juggling 2 teenage boys, so she and Aurora often swapped parenting stories, grateful they weren't navigating these waters alone. On this particular morning, Aurora stepped off the bus a few blocks early, deciding to grab coffee from a small cafe near Redwood's skyscraper. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the tall buildings. Hurrying past polished storefronts, she felt an odd sense of belonging in this part of town, something she never used to feel in the polished corporate district. The cafe bustled with early risers. Aurora ordered a small latte, carefully counting out her newly freed-up cash. She still kept a close eye on every expense. Apprenticeship pay was better, but not enormous, and she had obligations like rent, groceries, and Mia's after-school activities. Still, being able to buy a latte now and then without deep guilt felt like a tiny triumph. While she waited, she checked Redwood's internal messaging app on her phone. Her group had a chat thread to exchange notes before each day's session. Today's topic: Redwood's approach to brand partnerships. They would learn how Redwood selected charities and community projects to sponsor. Aurora tapped an excited response, saying she couldn't wait, then slipped the phone back into her purse and collected her latte. Up on Redwood's 10th floor, Aurora greeted the day's trainer, a soft-spoken man named Patrick who specialized in community engagement. He guided the apprentices into a smaller meeting room lined with motivational posters featuring Redwood's outreach projects around the city. One poster showed children reading in a newly renovated library, courtesy of Redwood's donations. Another highlighted a job fair Redwood hosted in a disadvantaged neighborhood. Aurora studied them, feeling her heart stir. She could have been one of those attendees once upon a time. Patrick explained that Redwood believed in a sustainable philanthropy model, focusing on long-term community impact rather than one-off donations. He asked each apprentice to think of a local cause they personally cared about, then craft a mock proposal for Redwood to consider supporting that cause. Aurora's hand shot up. "Does Redwood ever offer mentorship for younger students?" she asked, recalling Mia and the kids in her neighborhood who lacked after-school resources, like visits from employees to elementary schools or workshops for kids. Patrick smiled. "We do. The Redwood Mentorship Initiative is something we've expanded over the past year. Let's talk about that idea. Maybe your proposal can center on a new program for local schools." Aurora's heart fluttered at the possibility. The memory of her own youth, where resources seemed scarce, made her believe wholeheartedly in the importance of giving children early exposure to creative and tech-friendly experiences. Patrick encouraged Aurora to put her thoughts on paper. By lunchtime, she had typed out a first draft on her tablet, proposing a monthly Redwood Career Day at a few elementary schools. Her writing was a bit rough, but the passion behind it shone. After lunch, the apprentices reconvened to present their proposals. Belinda championed an initiative to provide old Redwood laptops to underfunded schools, while Marcus suggested a program that paired Redwood employees with ex-military folks seeking to transition into tech roles. Giovanna pitched a Green Redwood campaign for community gardens. One by one, they stood at the front of the room, referencing slides or notes. When Aurora's turn came, she felt a quiver of nerves. Public speaking wasn't something she'd often done outside of casual interactions. But she took a breath and clicked to her first slide. The Redwood School Mentorship Program. She explained the importance of guiding kids early, how local volunteers from Redwood could visit, offer simple coding lessons, or show kids how design works in real life. She admitted she didn't know all the logistics, but she believed Redwood's resources could make a huge difference. Patrick beamed. "That's a wonderful concept, Aurora. Exactly the kind of local engagement Redwood strives for. Good job." Her classmates applauded politely, and Aurora's cheeks warmed with pride. Before Redwood, she never would have pictured herself confidently pitching ideas in a corporate setting. She glanced around at the bright, supportive faces. Something in her realized this was only the beginning. By mid-afternoon, they wrapped up, and Patrick dismissed them early, saying, "Take the rest of the day to explore Redwood's resources. Research how these proposals could be fleshed out. Tomorrow, we'll refine them." Excited chatter filled the hallway as the apprentices spilled out. Many planned to grab coffee or gather in Redwood's lounge for brainstorming. Aurora, though, remembered she needed to return her finished slides to the training center's main server, a small detail, but important. She waved to Belinda and headed back into the classroom to finalize her files. As she worked, the room fell quiet, empty except for the hum of air conditioning. She inserted her flash drive, transferring her files. A momentary glitch in the network made her wait, so she paced near the window, glancing out at the city below. The buildings shone under the sun. Cars moved like tiny toys on the streets far beneath her. She thought about how, not long ago, she was the one scurrying below, never imagining she might look down on that same bustle from the vantage of an office. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the doorway. "That's quite a view, isn't it?" Aurora whirled around. Standing there was David McAllister himself, holding a tablet in one hand and wearing a tailored suit. Her heart gave a jolt of surprise. He looked composed, but there was a warmth in his gaze that she recognized from that rainy night, when he'd been just another stranger in need. "Yes, Mr. McAllister," she managed, clearing her throat. She realized belatedly she was simply gaping at him. "It's nice to see you again." He stepped into the room, letting the door close behind him. "David," he reminded gently, "and the feeling's mutual. I heard we had a new class in training and I had time to check in. Didn't expect to see you here alone, though." Aurora blushed, waving at the computer. "I was just finishing uploading my group project. We did mock proposals for Redwood's outreach. I put together an idea about Redwood staff mentoring local elementary schools. It's probably small potatoes compared to the real projects going on." He shook his head, stepping closer to glance at her slides on the computer screen. No idea is too small. In fact, Redwood's best initiatives often come from employees who see a need in the community firsthand. She fiddled with the edge of her tablet case. "You've been busy, I'm sure. I wanted to say thank you again for all of this. You gave me a chance, and I'm trying really hard to make the most of it." David regarded her with a thoughtful expression. "You don't owe me anything. If anything, Redwood benefits from dedicated people like you." He paused, leaning lightly against a desk. "So, how are you finding the apprenticeship? Is it what you hoped for?" Aurora exhaled, feeling more at ease than she expected in his presence. "It's beyond what I hoped. At first, I was afraid I wouldn't fit in, but everyone's been supportive. I've learned so much, from scheduling tools to brand guidelines, and this philanthropy segment, it reminded me why Redwood stands out. I never knew a company could invest so much in the community." David smiled. "That's good to hear. We try to foster more than just profit margins, and if you ever have questions, concerns—" He hesitated slightly, as if weighing his words. "You can reach out. Redwood's a big place, but I don't want apprentices to feel lost, especially not you." The quiet sincerity of his tone made Aurora's pulse quicken. She smiled gratefully. "I appreciate that. I will keep it in mind." For a moment they stood there in comfortable silence. The memory of how they first met flickered between them, her with the last of her emergency money, him soaked in the rain. It felt surreal to see him now, the confident CEO offering that same gentle kindness in a place of polished floors and tech-savvy ambitions. "Well," David said eventually, pushing off from the desk, "I won't hold you up any longer. Keep up the good work, and definitely tell your trainers about this elementary school idea. Someone in our outreach department would want to see it." "I will," Aurora promised, feeling a surge of renewed excitement. He nodded, offering a small wave before heading out. In the blink of an eye, he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. She gazed at the closed door, heart fluttering with both admiration and gratitude. For all Redwood's grandeur, David never seemed to forget a single person's importance. And for Aurora, that meant everything. She wrapped up her file transfer, feeling lighter than ever. She had a million ideas buzzing in her head, ways to refine the mentorship proposal, new design concepts, maybe even some queries for Redwood's philanthropic arm. She wondered if she might one day land in a team that connected these passions: design, community service, and Redwood's innovative spirit. As she headed toward the elevator, her reflection in the glass door revealed a woman glowing with confidence. The road ahead was still long, with more training modules, evaluations, and the final test of whether Redwood would offer her a permanent position. But for now, the doubts that once held her back were overshadowed by possibility. A single act of selfless compassion had opened this path, and with each day, Aurora felt it leading her toward a life she never imagined could be hers. Aurora's proposed school mentorship program spread through Redwood faster than she ever expected. It began as a simple presentation for her apprentice group, capturing the trainer's attention. Next, it caught the eye of an associate in Redwood's outreach department. Within a week, she was summoned to a small conference room, where a woman named Celeste, sporting a Redwood outreach badge, greeted her with a wide smile. "This is a wonderful idea," Celeste enthused, gesturing for Aurora to take a seat. She slid a few papers across the table, documents that explained Redwood's existing philanthropic ventures with local schools and youth programs. "We've been looking to expand our involvement in elementary education. The concept of bringing Redwood employees directly into classrooms is something our team has tossed around, but we lacked a concrete plan. Your draft outlines a lovely start." Aurora blushed, overwhelmed that her simple draft was being treated so seriously. "Thank you," she said softly, glancing at her hands. "I didn't expect anyone to notice it so soon." Celeste laughed. "Are you kidding? Between your trainers raving about your enthusiasm and your group's feedback, it was bound to get to us. We'd like your help refining the proposal. The final plan might even be presented to senior leadership for approval, and if it gets the green light, we'll pilot it in a few local schools." Senior leadership? Aurora's heart gave a nervous flutter. That could include David McAllister himself. She swallowed, trying to hide her jitters. "Of course," she said. "I'd love to help in any way I can." Celeste slid a thick binder across the table. "These are some of our standard procedures and forms for new initiatives. You'll need to adapt them. Don't stress about the legal language. We have a legal team to finalize contracts with the schools. We just want your input, especially regarding how Redwood volunteers would interact with children. You know, day-to-day logistics." Aurora nodded, skimming the binder's table of contents. Everything from background checks for volunteers to guidelines on working with minors. It looked daunting, but also thrilling. She envisioned Redwood employees showing kids the wonders of basic coding or simple design concepts. Thinking of Mia and children who rarely got that kind of exposure fueled her excitement. "Any questions?" Celeste asked, leaning forward. Aurora exhaled. "Just, how do I juggle this with my usual apprentice tasks?" Celeste tapped a pen on the table. "We can coordinate with your manager. You'll probably split time between your normal modules and this project. Since it's a Redwood outreach program, it all ties back into your apprenticeship anyway." Her eyes danced with encouragement. "You're a natural fit for this, Aurora, trust me." "Okay," Aurora said, trying to keep the tremor of excitement from her voice. "I'm ready." Her days became a whirlwind. In the mornings, Aurora still attended training sessions with the rest of the apprentices, learning Redwood's processes and systems. But a few afternoons each week, she'd slip away to work with Celeste on refining the school mentorship program. They brainstormed how Redwood staff could lead short activities, like building small model towers to teach basic engineering principles or letting kids experiment with art software. They also considered how to match volunteers' skills to the right age groups. Aurora found herself immersed in policy documents, references to child protection guidelines, and tips on effective presentations for young audiences. She was no expert in any of this, yet she pored over every detail, determined to make the program practical. Sometimes the legalese spun her head, but Celeste would calm her, promising the lawyers handled the nitty-gritty. They just needed Aurora's sincere ideas. Even in the thick of it, Aurora never forgot her original motivation: Mia and the children who lacked enriching opportunities. That thought kept her inspired, even on days when the workload felt overwhelming. When she occasionally second-guessed herself, "Why am I, an apprentice spearheading something this big?" she recalled Celeste's words, "You're a natural fit," and David's quiet trust. It propelled her forward. One afternoon, Belinda found Aurora hunched over her tablet in the apprentice lounge, scribbling notes about volunteer training sessions. "You disappeared for half the day," Belinda teased, parking herself next to Aurora. "What secret redwood project have they got you on?" Aurora grinned. "It's kind of an extension of that school mentorship idea. The outreach team asked me to help flesh it out. I didn't realize it would grow into something so complex so fast." Belinda's eyes widened. "So you're basically co-developing a whole philanthropic program? Talk about moving up fast." She gave Aurora a playful nudge. "I'm happy for you. Just don't forget the rest of us when you're busy rubbing elbows with the big shots." "Oh, please," Aurora said, though she felt a warmth in her chest. "This is still an unpaid idea, basically, and it's not set in stone. There's no guarantee it'll get final approval." Belinda waved away the modesty. "You're one of us, Aurora, and we're rooting for you. You're making a difference." The words made Aurora smile, though a small part of her still braced for potential disappointment. Redwood was famously competitive and thorough. Any initiative that reached the top had to pass scrutiny from multiple committees. She would need more than passion to see this idea through. Weeks rolled by, her apprenticeship nearing its midpoint. Aurora felt she was mastering Redwood's standard software, scheduling tools, brand guidelines, and communication protocols. She shadowed departments, gleaning insights from marketing teams, tech divisions, and even sitting in on a finance meeting, though that last one left her head spinning with numbers. Meanwhile, the school mentorship program's blueprint grew thicker. Celeste arranged for Aurora to speak briefly at an internal outreach meeting, a small gathering of Redwood employees who led philanthropic ventures. Standing at the front of a conference room full of professionals, Aurora's nerves were in high gear, but she clutched her notes like a lifeline. Children in underserved communities rarely get hands-on experiences with technology or design, she explained, voice trembling slightly. This program could change that, one school at a time. Redwood staff could volunteer a few hours each month, giving kids a spark, showing them what's possible beyond their immediate surroundings. The room was quiet, but not with dismissal. Rather, she sensed a focused curiosity. When she concluded, a ripple of applause followed, and one employee, a veteran Redwood engineer, raised a hand. "I'd love to teach basic robotics to fourth graders," he said, sounding enthused. Others chimed in about coding workshops, painting demos, or even reading sessions. Celeste flashed Aurora a proud grin. Afterward, they collected sign-up sheets from employees who wanted to volunteer if the program launched. Over 20 names in one day alone, Aurora noted with excitement. This was getting real. Late one evening, Aurora stayed after hours in an empty meeting room, finalizing the next draft of the program's proposal. The building was eerily quiet once most employees left. Soft overhead lights hummed, and the city shimmered through the windows in the darkness. She took a moment to stretch, her tablet screen glowing with bullet points about partnerships, budgets, and timelines. She felt a pang of exhaustion. Juggling these responsibilities alongside her normal apprenticeship modules was no easy feat. Yet her heart buzzed with a sense of purpose. A distant memory floated to mind, of her younger self, barely able to finish high school while working nights, longing for someone to guide her. She thought of the times she'd glimpsed successful professionals and felt an unspoken barrier, like she was never meant to cross that line. And now, Here she was, in Redwood's offices after hours, planning a mentorship program that could break down that very barrier for future generations. Footsteps approached outside. The door opened slightly, revealing David McAllister. He looked momentarily surprised to find the room occupied, then offered a smile. "Burning the midnight oil?" Aurora quickly stood. "Oh, hi. Yes, I was just finishing this draft. I didn't realize anyone else was around." David stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. He wore his usual polished suit, though his tie was slightly loosened, suggesting a long day. "It's good to see you're passionate, but don't overwork yourself," she chuckled nervously. "I'm fine, just excited. The outreach team wants this final draft soon." He nodded, gaze drifting to the tablet screen. "Celeste gave me a quick update. The sign-ups for potential volunteers have been impressive, I hear. That's promising." Aurora's heart skipped, so he'd been following the progress. "Yes, it's been overwhelming in a good way," she said. "If we pass the next review phase, we'll do a pilot at 2 or 3 schools, then hopefully expand." David's smile reached his eyes. "You're making a tangible difference, you know. I always believed Redwood needed fresh perspectives, someone who remembers what it's like to be on the outside looking in." She blushed slightly, touched by his words. They stood quietly for a moment in the softly lit room, the city's skyline behind them. Aurora tried to find the right words to express her gratitude. "I'd never have done any of this if you hadn't given me a chance. I know it's Redwood's culture to empower people, but you were the one who reached out first." He shook his head. "You earned your place, Aurora. That night in the rain." He paused, choosing his words. "You showed me something rare, true empathy with zero expectation of return. That's what I want Redwood to stand for too. Compassion, innovation, and opportunity for those who might not otherwise get it." Aurora swallowed, recalling how that single moment on the sidewalk had set off a chain reaction for both of them. She felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, pride, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she murmured softly. David nodded, and a gentle silence settled. Beyond the glass walls, only the faint hum of the ventilation system and distant city traffic could be heard. Aurora realized how late it was. She saved her documents and gathered her things. "I should let you go," David said, stepping aside so she could pass. "Make sure you get home safe." "I will," she promised. "Good night, David." He echoed the farewell, remaining by the doorway as she headed to the elevator. When she glanced back, she saw him standing there, almost pensive. It struck her again that for all his power and status, he carried a quiet humility, one that resonated with her own values. Stepping into the elevator, Aurora felt the day's exhaustion melt into a warm glow. This wasn't just a job or a stroke of luck anymore. She was building a legacy, something that might survive long after her apprenticeship. And David, the stranger she once helped without knowing his name, was guiding Redwood to do the same on a grand scale. Her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls caught her eye. The woman gazing back wore the slightest of smiles, a quiet confidence. She clutched her folder close. Yes, there was still much to prove, but she was certain. She had finally stepped onto a path that mattered, and she'd walk it with all the dedication she could muster. Weeks turned into a flurry of progress and planning. Aurora's normal apprenticeship responsibilities meshed with her involvement in Redwood's outreach department. Each day, she split her time between learning Redwood's internal protocols and meeting with Celeste to refine the proposed school mentorship program. She hardly noticed the long hours anymore. Despite the fatigue, each milestone energized her. Outreach staff and volunteers tested sample lesson ideas. One afternoon, Aurora visited a local elementary school to meet a teacher who might help pilot the project. The children's excitement left her beaming. Seeing their curiosity made every hour of drafting and revising worth it. She returned to Redwood's offices bright-eyed, more convinced than ever that the program could succeed. Meanwhile, her apprenticeship group neared its final training modules. The trainers announced they would soon begin official evaluations, after which Redwood would decide if each apprentice would transition into a permanent role and in which department. Nervous anticipation buzzed among her peers. "Have you thought about where you want to land?" Belinda asked Aurora one morning over coffee in Redwood's bustling cafeteria. "Some of the others are aiming for design, marketing, even project management. What about you?" Aurora took a moment to reflect. She'd started off excited by design, given her past studio experience. But now, with her heart poured into the mentorship proposal, a new path beckoned. "I love design, but I'm also drawn to Redwood's outreach department," she admitted. "Working with the community kids, bridging that gap, it's like I finally found something that lights me up." Belinda smiled knowingly. "You're a natural fit, just like everyone's been saying. Maybe Redwood will give you a spot there." Aurora hoped so. Still, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. The outreach department didn't typically hire fresh apprentices right away. They usually picked people who had proven themselves in other areas first. But Aurora pushed aside her worries. If there was even a small chance, she'd give it her all. As part of the final evaluation process, Redwood assigned each apprentice a mentor from their chosen track. Aurora's jaw nearly dropped when she learned that Celeste had personally requested to mentor her. The news arrived via an email from HR. "Dear Aurora, congratulations on advancing to the mentorship phase. You have been paired with Celeste Hamilton from Outreach. Please connect with her for scheduling and responsibilities." Aurora rushed to find Celeste, who was in her office scanning through volunteer sign-up sheets for the program. "You requested me?" Aurora asked, peeking around the door. Celeste looked up with a grin. "Of course. We're already working together and I see real potential in you, not just for the school mentorship program but for Redwood's broader initiatives. If you'd like to focus your evaluation on outreach projects, I'm here to guide you." Relief and excitement flooded Aurora. This might be her best shot at proving she could be a long-term asset to Redwood's outreach team. I'd be honored," she said sincerely. Celeste briefed her. Over the next few weeks, Aurora would assist on multiple outreach tasks, not just the school program. They'd monitor Redwood's charity partnerships, attend staff meetings about social impact budgets, and even visit a local food bank Redwood sponsored. Each experience would shape Aurora's final evaluation. Aurora listened, heart thudding with eagerness. She couldn't wait to step beyond the pilot program into Redwood's greater philanthropic ecosystem. She wanted to learn how these efforts were funded and structured, and how Redwood measured success. Celeste's openness and warmth made the learning curve less intimidating. The following week, Aurora found herself riding in a company car with Celeste en route to a small neighborhood center that Redwood helped renovate after storm damage. 2 Redwood employees joined them, a construction specialist and a project manager, both assigned to oversee repairs and expansions. Aurora cradled a notepad on her lap, ready to document everything. During the drive, Celeste explained Redwood's sustainability approach. "We don't just drop money for renovations, we also coordinate with local leaders to ensure they have long-term plans for upkeep and programming. Otherwise, a building is just a shell." Aurora nodded, scribbling notes. When they arrived, they met staff from the community center, who proudly showed off a refurbished library, a multi-purpose hall for youth activities, and a small tech corner Redwood had sponsored. Aurora wandered through the library's aisles, scanning colorful posters encouraging children to read. A wave of emotion hit her, memories of libraries being her refuge during childhood, back when she had no spare money for books. Now, Redwood was part of providing that same refuge for others. An older volunteer beamed at Aurora. "Your folks at Redwood are real gems. We've never had this level of sustained support. Usually donors come and go, but Redwood stays." Celeste caught Aurora's eye, smiling gently. "That's what we strive for," she said. Aurora's admiration for Redwood soared further. She wanted to be part of that bigger vision. Back at Redwood headquarters, she compiled her notes about the visit, brainstorming ways the school mentorship program could link to this community center. Maybe Redwood volunteers could host reading clubs or weekend workshops there. She stayed late, piecing together these possibilities into a cohesive outline. By the time she closed her documents, the office had mostly emptied out. Tucking her laptop into her bag, she stepped into a quiet hallway. Just then, she spotted David McAllister emerging from a nearby conference room, tie loosened as usual at the end of a long day. He noticed her and offered a warm nod. "Working late again?" he asked, strolling closer. Aurora smiled sheepishly. "Yes, I was visiting a community center earlier and I had to update some notes for Celeste." She hesitated, then added, "I'm really grateful for this mentor phase. I'm learning so much, not just about Redwood, but about how outreach can truly change communities." David's expression softened. "It shows, Aurora. Every time I hear Celeste mention the program's progress, your name comes up. She speaks highly of your dedication." Pride fluttered in her chest. "I can't let her down, or you," she murmured. He waved off the notion. "It's not about me. This company thrives on people who genuinely care about what they do. You're proving that every day." His words sank into her heart. For a moment, she recalled how uncertain she'd felt when she first stepped into Redwood, worried she wouldn't measure up. Now, thanks to the synergy of her own drive and Redwood's supportive culture, she was finding her place. She realized she wanted to ask him something that had been quietly nagging at the back of her mind. "David," she began, voice quieter, "may I ask how you got started with outreach? I read about Redwood's philanthropic roots, but you personally, you seem very invested in it." He paused, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "When Redwood was smaller, it was purely tech-focused, but I always had an interest in giving back. My family background—" He broke off momentarily as though weighing whether to continue. "My parents struggled a lot before they found their footing. We didn't have much, but neighbors helped us, sometimes strangers. As Redwood grew, I felt an obligation, no, an opportunity, to be that helping hand for others. It just felt right." Aurora's chest tightened. She thought of that rainy night, a moment when she'd helped him without knowing who he was and how it had led to this. "I understand," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's the smallest kindness that changes someone's entire path." Their eyes met, both recalling that fateful night in the downpour. Neither said it aloud, but it was there, an unspoken recognition that kindness had shaped their bond. David broke the moment with a slight smile, glancing at the clock on the wall. "You should head home before it gets too late," he said gently. "Mia's probably waiting." Aurora nodded, a warm glow spreading through her. "Right, and you should rest too. Thank you again for believing in me, believing in all of us apprentices." He gave a slight wave before she turned to leave. As she walked away, Aurora felt her heart brim with a renewed sense of purpose. She thought of the children at the community center, of Mia, and of all those who'd benefit if Redwood's outreach expanded further. She had found not just a job, but a calling, and she intended to carry it as far as she could. The final stretch of the apprenticeship evaluation loomed. Redwood scheduled official review panels where apprentices would present what they'd learned and propose which department they hoped to join. Most of her peers buzzed with excitement or anxious energy, perfecting their pitch decks and brushing up on corporate lingo. Aurora planned to highlight her design background alongside her outreach contributions, praying Redwood would see how both skills intertwined. But as the review approached, Celeste dropped a bombshell of news. The Redwood School Mentorship Program had passed internal vetting and was set to be pitched directly to the senior leadership team, and Celeste wanted Aurora to present alongside her. Aurora nearly dropped the stack of documents she was carrying when she heard that. Me? Present to top executives? She imagined a lineup of suits, including possibly David, all analyzing her data. Her pulse quickened. Celeste, I'm just an apprentice. Celeste laughed, shaking her head firmly. You've been the driving force, Aurora. You've crafted much of the practical framework. The leadership team needs to hear your passion. I'll handle the formalities. You speak to the heart of the program. Trust me, you've got this. Tremors of both fear and excitement coursed through Aurora. She couldn't deny a spark inside her that longed to stand there, championing a cause she believed in so deeply. All right, she said, trying to sound confident. I'll do it. She spent the next few days refining slides, adjusting proposals, and rehearsing short talking points about the pilot schools, volunteer logistics, and expected outcomes. Belinda and a few other apprentices helped by giving her feedback after hours, cheering her on. Aurora practiced speaking in front of a mirror in a quiet meeting room, occasionally stumbling over corporate jargon. But each time she reminded herself it wasn't about fancy words. It was about real impact for real kids. On the morning of the presentation, her nerves were so intense she barely touched breakfast. She arrived early to the conference room where Celeste was already arranging documents and adjusting the projection screen. "Breathe," Celeste whispered with a smile. "I'll open with an overview, then pass it to you for the main pitch. Ready?" Aurora nodded shakily. She smoothed the front of her blazer, a thrift store find she'd tailored slightly to fit better, thanks to her old seamstress skills. As Redwood's executives began trickling in, Aurora stood near Celeste, trying not to fidget. She recognized a few from company newsletters, and her pulse spiked when David McAllister entered, greeting colleagues with polite nods. He glanced her way, lips curving into a reassuring smile. Somehow, that simple gesture steadied her pulse. Celeste kicked off the presentation, outlining Redwood's current outreach portfolio, then segued into the exciting new initiative for local schools. She introduced Aurora. The heart behind this proposal, she's been vital in developing the framework. As Aurora stepped forward, a hush fell over the room. She took a breath, recalling her practiced lines. The slides glowed on the screen behind her, showing kids from a pilot classroom experiment, Redwood volunteer signups, and timelines for rolling out the program. She spoke earnestly, less like a corporate drone, more like a passionate advocate. Words flowed from her heart. The importance of early exposure, how Redwood employees could spark kids' imaginations, and how even a few hours a month could shape a child's future. Some executives asked questions about costs, liability, measuring success. Aurora answered as best she could, leaning on the data Celeste had compiled. Others asked how Redwood would ensure volunteers stayed committed. Aurora explained the orientation process she and Celeste had drafted, trainings, checklists, backup plans if a volunteer dropped out. She tried to exude confidence, even though inside she felt like she was navigating shark-filled waters. Throughout the Q&A, David observed quietly, letting others probe details. When the flurry of inquiries died down, he finally spoke. "Thank you, Celeste, Aurora. This aligns beautifully with Redwood's core values. The only concern I'd raise is scale. Once we prove it in 2 or 3 pilot schools, do we have a roadmap to expand district-wide or even city-wide?" Aurora's heart fluttered. His question was big picture. She had an answer, though, because she'd dreamed about it. "Yes," she said, pulling up a final slide she'd stashed. "We have a phased growth plan here. It's ambitious, but if Redwood commits, we could reach dozens of schools in a couple of years." She gestured at the bullet points, highlighting how Redwood's internal volunteer structure could grow alongside partnerships with local education authorities. David's face lit with interest. He shared a quick exchange of glances with the other executives, many of whom nodded thoughtfully. After a brief conference among themselves, the head of Redwood's philanthropic division announced, "We're on board with launching a pilot this quarter. Let's do it." Applause rippled around the table. Celeste discreetly patted Aurora's shoulder, both of them beaming with relief. The executives moved on to next steps, chatting about budget allocations and school contract forms. Through it all, Aurora stood at the front of the room feeling a wave of triumph. She'd done it. Her idea, once scribbled on a tablet during training, was now officially recognized by Redwood's senior leadership, and David's encouraging nod felt like the final seal of approval. When the meeting concluded, executives filed out, some offering handshakes or brief congratulations. David lingered, stepping up to Aurora. "Well done," he said quietly, sincerity in his eyes. "You've done Redwood proud. More importantly, you're going to do a lot of kids proud." Her throat constricted with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her folder. "Really, I couldn't have done this without—" He shook his head. "Your own drive brought you here. I just opened a door that you walked through." Then, with a warm smile, he added, "Never forget that." She nodded, blinking back tears. As he turned to exit, Celeste swooped in, practically bouncing on her toes. "We did it. They love it. We're greenlit to start next month." She gave Aurora a quick hug. "This is huge." Aurora managed a shaky laugh. I can't believe it," she said, leaning against the edge of the conference table. But even as disbelief buzzed through her, she felt it give way to joy. All of her past struggles, counting coins at the diner, the tension of living paycheck to paycheck, seemed distant now. She hadn't just changed her own life. She was about to impact countless children in the community. As she left the conference room, her heart soared with gratitude and an eagerness for what lay ahead. The final phase of her apprenticeship still loomed, but today felt like destiny in motion. She had found a cause worth fighting for, a company that believed in her, and most importantly, a belief in herself she'd never felt before. A single act of kindness on a rainy night had led her here, and she intended to make every drop of that kindness count. The days following the successful leadership pitch were a whirlwind of activity. Celeste tasked Aurora with helping prepare for the school mentorship program's pilot launch, coordinating with 2 local elementary schools, finalizing volunteer training sessions, and creating a schedule for the first few visits. The pace was dizzying, and Aurora spent longer hours than ever at Redwood, but every minute felt purposeful. She also couldn't ignore the upcoming final evaluation for her apprenticeship. Redwood's guidelines stated that each apprentice would soon present their cumulative learning to a review panel. Based on that assessment and the input of their assigned mentor, they might receive a permanent job offer. For Aurora, it felt like her entire life hinged on these next few weeks. One evening, Celeste and Aurora stayed late in a small meeting room, double-checking the volunteer orientation materials for any last-minute edits. Aurora's eyes were bleary from staring at her laptop. Around them, the office had grown quiet. Most employees were already gone. Celeste stretched her arms overhead. "We're practically ready," she announced, a thread of excitement in her voice. "The first group of Redwood volunteers will visit Hillside Elementary next Monday. You and I will go welcome them and observe the classroom activities." Aurora grinned, unable to contain her glee. "It's hard to believe it's happening. I was just an apprentice with an idea, and now—" She gestured at the sign-up sheets, activity plans, and emailed confirmations from teachers. "You made it real," Celeste said gently. "Never forget that. Also," she paused, fiddling with a pen, "I want you to prepare a small talk for that day. Introduce yourself to the teachers and the volunteers. Explain the vision. It'll set the tone for the program." Aurora's heart thumped. She recalled her nerves when presenting to Redwood's leadership, but she'd managed it. "Yes, sure, I can do that." "Perfect. Now," Celeste continued, leaning back in her chair, "we should talk about your final evaluation. You've done amazing work in outreach, and I'm recommending that Redwood bring you on full-time in our department." Aurora's eyes widened. "You are? Really?" Celeste nodded with a smile. "I wouldn't have asked you to stand by my side in these projects if I wasn't prepared to vouch for you. You have a genuine passion and an understanding of community needs. That's hard to teach." Aurora felt an almost dizzy relief. I'm honored," she said softly. The idea of a stable position in Redwood's outreach department had become her dream, but hearing Celeste confirm it felt surreal. Celeste stood, gathering her bag. "Go home and rest. There's still a review panel and some formalities, but I'm confident in you. Just keep doing what you're doing." In the days leading up to her final review, Aurora balanced frantic preparations for both the school pilot and her own evaluation. Late one afternoon, she and Belinda found each other in the break room, grabbing quick cups of tea. Belinda sighed dramatically. "I swear, I'm having nightmares about messing up my final presentation. My mentor keeps quizzing me on Redwood's project management tools, and I'm paranoid I'll blank out." Aurora offered a reassuring smile. "You'll do great. You're one of the most organized people I know." "I hope so." Belinda then arched an eyebrow. "I hear Celeste requested you directly for outreach. Everyone's talking about it. If Redwood doesn't hire you, it'd be a crime." Heat touched Aurora's cheeks. "It still feels like a dream. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." "No shoe is dropping," Belinda declared firmly. "We've all seen you thrive here. It's been amazing to watch." Aurora's chest warmed. The support from her peers felt like a balm to her anxieties. Regardless of how the final panels went, she was grateful for the bonds formed within her apprentice group. She secretly wished every one of them would find their spot at Redwood too. On the morning of her final evaluation, Aurora arrived early, dressed in her carefully tailored blazer and holding a slim portfolio of her work. She had printed samples, the school mentorship program outline, some design mock-ups from her earlier modules, and a brief summary of her involvement in Redwood's philanthropic visits. She spent a moment in a quiet hallway, inhaling deeply to calm her racing heart. The review panel took place in a glass-walled conference room. 3 people sat behind a long table: Darren from HR, a middle-aged woman from Redwood's operations team, and Celeste. Seeing Celeste there eased some of Aurora's tension. At least she had a friendly face in the mix. They invited Aurora to stand at a podium and present her journey. She began with a concise recap of her time as an apprentice, her introduction to Redwood's brand standards, her group exercises, and how her interest in community outreach grew into a full-fledged proposal. She clicked through slides showcasing the pilot program's scheduled launch. Her voice trembled only slightly. Darren asked a few questions about her technical proficiency. The operations rep inquired about her long-term goals within Redwood. Aurora replied honestly that she hoped to continue bridging design and community engagement, ensuring Redwood's philanthropic initiatives stayed fresh and connected to real needs. Finally, Celeste smiled at Aurora, voice warm. "In my personal assessment, Aurora has exceeded our expectations. She's driven, collaborative, and already has proven leadership skills in launching the school mentorship program. I recommend her for a permanent role in Redwood's outreach department, focusing on youth initiatives and design communications." Aurora's heart soared. Celeste's endorsement felt like a golden key. She held her breath, hoping the other 2 panelists would agree. They consulted quietly, scribbling on forms. After a tense moment of silence, Darren looked up, smiling. "I think we have what we need. Thank you, Aurora. We'll finalize our reports and notify you soon." Aurora's stomach flipped. That was it? She hoped for an immediate answer, but Redwood's protocol was to complete all apprentice reviews before issuing official offers. She managed a polite nod, thanked them, and exited the conference room with a swirl of relief and nerves. The following day, Redwood hosted a small celebratory gathering for the apprenticeship group. An afternoon social in the lounge, where trainers and mentors offered congratulations on completing the program. The room buzzed with chatter, music playing softly in the background. Apprentices exchanged stories about their review panels, some confident, others worried. Aurora sipped a soft drink, trying to quell her own jitters. She spotted David McAllister entering the lounge, greeting people casually. Though the CEO was busy, he made time to shake hands with each apprentice, a hallmark of Redwood's inclusive culture. When he reached Aurora, he grinned. "I hear you did well in your review. he said, voice low but warm over the lounge's hum. "I think so," she replied, offering a tentative smile. Celeste was very supportive. David nodded. "She believes in you, and so do I." His gaze flicked around to ensure they weren't overheard, then he added, "Just know, no matter the outcome of this formal process, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, what we've accomplished together." Aurora's cheeks flushed. She glanced around the festive room, recalling where she'd started. Lost in debt, working 2 jobs, caring for Mia. Now she stood among Redwood's best and brightest, forging a new path. "Thank you," she whispered, emotion thick in her throat. He squeezed her hand in a brief, friendly gesture before moving on to speak with other apprentices. She watched him go, heart alive with gratitude. The next day, she'd head to Hillside Elementary for the first official volunteer session. Then, hopefully soon, Redwood would finalize her position. The combination of those 2 milestones felt like a grand crossroad in her life. Early Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine and a crisp breeze. Aurora, Celeste, and a handful of Redwood volunteers pulled up in a company van outside Hillside Elementary. Children were trickling into the building, backpacks bouncing. Aurora's nerves danced, but excitement ruled. This was the pilot launch of the school mentorship program. In a sense, it was the first real test of whether their months of planning would pay off. Inside the school's modest lobby, they were greeted by a beaming principal. "We're thrilled you're here," she said, shaking Celeste's hand, then Aurora's. "Our 5th graders are gathered in the auditorium, eager to meet you." Volunteers lugged in supplies, laptops, small project kits, and colorful poster boards. Aurora led them down the hallway, remembering how she once walked similar halls as a child, longing for experiences that never came. Now, she was on the giving end. The auditorium buzzed with chatter. Rows of bright-eyed kids squirmed in their seats. A few teachers stood at the edges, smiling hesitantly. Aurora's pulse pounded, but she summoned her courage and stepped up to the front, Celeste by her side. Celeste welcomed everyone, explained Redwood's mission, then passed the microphone to Aurora. Swallowing her nerves, Aurora offered a big smile to the children. "Good morning. We're here from Redwood Innovations," she began. "We love using technology and creativity in our jobs, and we want to share some fun activities with you, because who knows, maybe one day you'll be the next great inventor, engineer, or artist." A wave of excitement ran through the students. Aurora introduced each volunteer, describing how they'd lead mini workshops. A software developer would show simple coding blocks, a designer would help draw characters, and a hardware specialist brought little circuit boards to demonstrate electricity. The children broke into smaller groups, rotating between stations. Laughter and exclamations of wonder echoed off the auditorium walls. Aurora wandered from group to group, snapping photos, checking on volunteers, guiding a kid who got stuck. She couldn't stop smiling. Seeing curiosity bloom in these young faces was everything she'd hoped for. Near the end of the session, a shy boy tugged at Aurora's sleeve. "Miss, how do I become a person who works at Redwood someday? Do I have to be super smart already?" Her heart squeezed. She knelt to his eye level. "You can do it if you stay curious, keep learning, and never stop trying," she said gently. "Sometimes people help us along the way. Even if we come from a place where we think it's impossible, there's always a path forward. Promise." His eyes lit up. "Cool," he whispered, a small grin forming. Aurora felt a lump in her throat. She remembered Mia at that age, remembered her own younger self, craving that same reassurance. Now she was giving it back. As the volunteers packed up, the principal thanked them profusely, praising how engaged the students were. Aurora exchanged elated glances with Celeste. Outside, loading the van, the Redwood team chattered about how well it had gone, how they couldn't wait to do it again. Driving away, Aurora looked out the van window at the receding school building. The feeling coursing through her was more than mere satisfaction. It was fulfillment, a deep sense of contributing to something bigger than herself. She wanted to do this for countless more schools, bridging hope and opportunity in a way she never thought possible. And through it all, she knew her Redwood journey was reaching a pivotal moment. She had done what she set out to do, prove she could make a genuine difference, prove that one small act of kindness, one choice to help a stranger, could reverberate far beyond a single life. As they turned onto the main road, Aurora allowed herself to hope that Redwood would see what she'd accomplished and cement her place here permanently. The next few days ran on pure adrenaline. After the resounding success at Hillside Elementary, word traveled fast through Redwood's corridors. Celeste received emails from other schools curious about the mentorship program, and Redwood volunteers began inquiring about scheduling additional visits. Aurora hovered at the center of it all, exhilarated by the momentum. And yet, amid the triumph, she couldn't ignore a mounting tension. Every apprentice awaited an official verdict about their permanent placement. HR had informed them that final decisions would roll out soon, by email or direct notification. For Aurora, each passing hour felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, wondering if Redwood would offer her the security she'd never known. On a warm Thursday morning, the entire apprentice group was summoned to Redwood's main auditorium for what was described as a final recognition event. Excitement buzzed in the air. Aurora arrived early, balancing a coffee cup in one hand, her Redwood ID badge clipped neatly to her lapel. She joined Belinda, Marcus, Giovanna, and a few others in the front rows. They exchanged hopeful glances, hearts pounding with anticipation. The lights dimmed, and Darren from HR took the stage. "Welcome, everyone," he said, adjusting the microphone. "Over the past months, you've immersed yourselves in Redwood's culture and learned a great deal. Each of you brought unique strengths, proven your resilience, and contributed to our ongoing projects. Today, we celebrate your journey and reveal our decisions about your future roles." A hush fell. Several Redwood department heads lined up behind Darren, prepared to congratulate or introduce new hires. A large projection screen lit up, displaying the apprentices' names in alphabetical order. One by one, the mentors stepped forward to announce who they would be welcoming into their teams. Aurora's pulse raced with each name called. Giovanna offered a position in marketing. Marcus, assigned to the tech division. Belinda, welcomed into project management. Each time someone's name echoed in the auditorium, applause burst forth, tears of relief shining in apprentices' eyes. Finally, Celeste took the mic, scanning the list on the screen. She found Aurora's name and paused, a subtle smile curving her lips. "Aurora Evans," she said clearly, her voice reflecting unmistakable pride. "It is my honor to announce that Redwood Outreach requests you as our newest program coordinator, specializing in youth initiatives and design communications." Time froze for Aurora. Cheers and claps erupted around her, but it sounded like a distant roar. She rose from her seat on shaky legs, making her way to the stage. Heart pounding, she forced herself to breathe. Her vision blurred for a second, as though she were seeing her own life from outside. This moment, so longed for, finally manifesting. Celeste extended a handshake. "Welcome aboard officially," she murmured. Aurora whispered back, "Thank you," her voice trembling. Accepting the handshake felt like stepping across a threshold, one that had loomed so large in her dreams. She had made it. Redwood wanted her, a permanent position. Her chest brimmed with a triumphant surge of emotion, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. The applause faded as the ceremony continued, but Aurora barely heard the rest. She held on to Celeste's words, replaying them in her mind. Redwood Outreach requests you, the final affirmation she had craved. After the event, apprentices turned new hires milled about in the auditorium's foyer. Congratulations, laughter, and group selfies abounded. Aurora stood near a table of celebratory pastries, still dazed by happiness, when Belinda rushed over. "You did it!" Belinda exclaimed, hauling Aurora into a hug. "Program coordinator in outreach, that's huge!" Aurora laughed through tears, hugging her friend back. "You're the new project manager in training, you did it too!" They squealed like teenagers at a surprise party. Soon Celeste joined them, pressing a redwood nameplate into Aurora's hands. It read, "Aurora Evans, Program Coordinator, Youth and Design." Aurora traced her fingertips over the engraved letters, swallowing a tight lump in her throat. "Your desk awaits in the outreach wing," Celeste teased. "We'll sort out the paperwork, and you'll officially start next Monday." Aurora's eyes shone. "I can't wait." That evening, Aurora practically floated home. She wanted to surprise Mia with the news in a fun way, so she stopped by a small bakery to purchase a celebratory cupcake. Inside the apartment, Mia sat at the table coloring, while Ms. Delgado prepared to leave. "I have something for you," Aurora declared, brandishing the cupcake box. Mia's face lit up with curiosity. "It's a treat, because Mommy just got a new job at Redwood. A real full-time job." Mia's mouth formed an O of delight. "Yay!" she exclaimed, bounding to Aurora and throwing her arms around her waist. Aurora laughed, ruffling Mia's hair. Ms. Delgado looked on from the doorway, her expression melting into warmth. "Congratulations, dear," Ms. Delgado said softly. "I always knew you'd rise." Aurora's eyes stung with happy tears. "I couldn't have done it without your help, picking Mia up, giving us comfort." The neighbor waved it off modestly and headed out. Aurora set the cupcake on the table, letting Mia devour it while she recounted the day's ceremony. Mia listened wide-eyed, occasionally piping in with enthusiasm. "Does that mean we have more money now? Can we get a puppy?" Aurora laughed, promising they'd reevaluate their budget before diving into puppy adoption. But inside, she felt a profound relief that they could finally consider small joys that once seemed impossible. Late that night, after Mia was asleep, Aurora tucked her daughter in and spent a few extra moments by her bedside. She kissed Mia's forehead, murmuring gratitude for the new life unfolding for them. Before turning out the light, Aurora glimpsed a drawing Mia had made, a simple rendition of a house with a yard and a rainbow arching overhead. The word Redwood was written in Mia's wobbly handwriting above the rainbow. Aurora's heart swelled. Everything was coming together. The following Monday marked her first day as a full-fledged Redwood employee. Returning to the building, she no longer felt like an apprentice or outsider. She rode the elevator to the outreach wing with confidence, stepping into a bright space dotted with posters of Redwood's various philanthropic initiatives. A small desk near Celeste's office bore her new nameplate. She ran her fingers across it in wonder. Celeste appeared, handing Aurora a stack of folders. "Morning, coworker," she said with a grin. "We've got a busy day. Hillside Elementary wants to schedule a second visit already, and Oakview Middle School is interested in a pilot expansion for older kids. Also, a few Redwood volunteers have new workshop ideas. Ready to dive in?" Aurora's eyes sparkled. "Absolutely." They moved into a standing meeting with the rest of the outreach team, discussing next steps for the school mentorship and brainstorming additional community partnerships. Aurora contributed ideas, took notes, and marveled at how normal yet thrilling it felt to be in these discussions as a peer, not just a trainee. No one questioned her presence. In fact, they welcomed her input. As they wrapped up, Celeste announced they'd be scheduling a formal debut of the school mentorship program for Redwood's entire staff, encouraging more volunteer sign-ups. "Aurora, I'd like you to lead that presentation too," Celeste added. "People should see the face behind this initiative." Aurora nodded, thrilled but nervous. She remembered how each presentation had pushed her beyond her comfort zone. Now it felt like a natural evolution, stepping further into the spotlight of Redwood's philanthropic efforts. Around noon, Aurora took a break to refuel at the cafeteria. She ran into Belinda, who was all smiles. "First day in outreach, huh?" Belinda teased. "I saw your name on the employee roster. Congratulations again." They chatted briefly, exchanging updates. Belinda's new project management role had her coordinating a small marketing campaign. Marcus, they heard, was already coding away in Redwood's tech labs. Their entire apprenticeship cohort seemed to be blossoming. After lunch, Aurora returned to her new desk only to find a message on her phone. David McAllister wanted to see her in his office when she had a moment. Her pulse jumped. She quickly informed Celeste and made her way up the gleaming elevator to the executive floors. In the sleek corridor leading to David's corner office, Adrienne, the same assistant who once guided Aurora as a nervous newcomer, greeted her with a knowing smile. "You can go in," she said, opening the door. Aurora stepped inside. The space was as pristine and light-filled as she remembered. David stood at the window, gazing over the city. He turned at her approach, wearing a relaxed expression. "Hello, Aurora," he said, motioning for her to sit on a small sofa. He joined her there, leaning forward with easy warmth. "I hear you've officially started in outreach. Congratulations. Again." "Thank you," Aurora said, breath still catching in her throat. She felt a surge of gratitude, memories of that fateful, rainy night swirling. "I never thought I'd see this day, but you opened that door like you said." He folded his hands. "You walked through it," he reminded gently. "And you've done more than I ever anticipated. The mentorship program has generated so much excitement. Already other departments want to replicate the model for older students, even possibly a Redwood Scholarship Fund. It's more than we dreamed." Aurora's cheeks flushed with pride. "I just wanted kids to have opportunities most of us never had," she said softly. "It's been a labor of love, from so many people, not just me." David nodded. "That's how it should be. Redwood thrives on collaboration." He paused as though weighing his words. "I'm grateful you let us see the world through your eyes. Sometimes being a CEO can create distance. It's easy to lose sight of individual lives. But you reminded me that real change happens when we bridge those gaps." A gentle silence settled. Aurora studied David's face, recalling the vulnerability he once showed under that street lamp. Their journeys had intertwined in a way neither could have predicted. Gratitude swelled in her chest. "I'm grateful too," she said. "For Redwood, for you, for everything." His smile deepened, and for a moment they simply breathed in the quiet unity of that understanding. Outside the windows the city sprawled, a testament to countless stories waiting to be touched by Redwood's outreach. Finally, David stood, offering a small bow of his head as a polite wrap-up. "Welcome to Redwood, Aurora," he said, voice warm with finality. "Your official Redwood, not just the apprentice one." She smiled and rose, giving a firm nod. "I won't let you down." "I know," he replied. With that, Aurora stepped away, feeling the weight of her new role with both humility and exhilaration. Back at her desk, Aurora took a few minutes to savor the reality. She was a Redwood employee, full-time, with benefits, a stable wage, and a place of genuine impact. No longer would she juggle diner shifts and design gigs just to scrape by. Mia could have a more secure upbringing. She could even dare to save for Mia's future, or maybe eventually move to a better apartment, one with space for both homework stations and laughter. A memory of the day she gave David her last cash fluttered through her mind. She remembered the shaky feeling of near panic, worried she wouldn't have enough for her own bus fare, worried she'd made a foolish choice. Now she knew that even a small act of kindness could set off a transformative chain reaction, one that would keep unfolding far beyond her own life. She glanced at her desk drawers. Tucked inside was a small collage she'd made, photos of Mia, a picture of Hillside Elementary's smiling students, and the Redwood logo. It reminded her daily of why she was here and how far she'd come. With a resolved smile, she organized her notes for the next volunteer orientation session. There was so much to do, an entire city's worth of children waiting to discover new horizons. And Aurora stood ready, prepared to guide them as she continued shaping her own remarkable journey. As she logged into her computer, an internal Redwood newsletter popped up, celebrating the successful integration of our newest employees. Aurora's name was listed among them, praising her innovative spirit. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart thrum with anticipation for all that lay ahead. From a humble act on a rainy night, she had ascended to a position where she could enact meaningful change, where she could, in turn, give children their own fateful moments of opportunity. And that knowledge set her soul alight with hope. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.